Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we are talking about The Mandalorian, Season 2, Episode 4, with Paul Hoppy and Ashley Coffin and myself, Matthew Fox. We're talking about Moff Gideon's secret plans, how the child will steal all of your snacks, and what happens when an actor who has a lifelong love of Star Wars gets to be in it. All that and more after this commercial break we have no control over. Back. This is Matthew. I'm joined, as I mentioned, by Paul and Ashley. Paul, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing good tonight. I've enjoyed this episode. It's been my favorite episode this season. It's actually the only one that I'd say I just unequivocally loved.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Cool. And Ashley, how are you doing tonight? How are you feeling about this episode?
Good. Pumped. That was fun. I love an action. A nice action-filled episode.
Yeah, we did. We got a couple of fun chase scenes. We had, we learned that the Imperial soldiers are still very bad at flying their bikes through any kind of canyons. They actually, this one they didn't even crash into the mountains. They crashed into each other, right?
I think they hit the edges of the canyon, and that banged them towards each other, and then they hit each other, spun out, and blew up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, some coordinated flying tactics
best
would help.
At what they do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're the best at what they do.
Yeah. And we're also finding that it seems like there's pretty much nothing in the universe that can't shoot down a TIE fighter.
I just love them so much. Every time the TIE fighters come, I'm like, oh, here we go. It's the noise, the sound their guns make. It's just nostalgic.
It is.
And nothing and now that they've got all the technology, it looks so good and it sounds so good in my living room. I was having a good time.
I love the whole wing folding down thing. At first it didn't make so much sense to me, but then I was like, oh wait, it's just their version of S-foils. Of course they would add this technology at some point, and it just looks really badass.
Yeah, it looks cool. They still can't hit anything. Actually, they can hit less than. I mean, in the original, in A New Hope, they blow up a lot of TIE fighters, right?
Right.
And
there's just always so many. It's always a swarm of TIE fighters, and you're like, uh-oh, they're never going to get out of this. And they do.
Yeah, no, their aim is directly relevant to the plot. I mean,
exactly.
It's all over the place. Well, I'm really glad you guys liked this episode. I got to admit, this was not my favorite. Mm-hmm. And I think it's in large part because it just wasn't the episode I thought we were going to get.
I knew you were going to say that.
That's why I asked you ahead of time, because I'd watched it last night, because, it comes out midnight California time. And I was like, do you want any casting spoilers?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it might have, I wasn't looking, I didn't have the same feeling about what this episode was going to be that you did, and so I feel like I wasn't disappointed by it in that way, and I kind of wanted to share that, kind of brace you for it, but at the same time, I totally always respect, no spoilers, unless people want whatever it is, so, anyway, go ahead, and, I mean, I'll just stop talking.
I think for me it's a couple things, and it's not just that we didn't get to see Ahsoka Tano. I was saying that I thought if we got to her, we wouldn't get to her till the very end.
Yeah.
Although I saw a lot of folks online really looking forward to seeing her this epised.
Yeah,
entirely.
I felt like that was a little optimistic, premature. Honestly, she feels like she's going to be an end of season 2 appearance to me.
That's entirely possible. I think it was more though. Honestly, when we started watching this episode, for the first 3 or 4 minutes, I thought maybe we were watching the wrong episode, because we the end of the episode started with Bo-Katan saying, the end of the last episode was him and Bo-Katan saying, okay, well, you helped me with my mission, now I'm going to help you with yours,
right?
And the fact that this felt like there was no connection to that at all, and I definitely wanted to see some kind of a handoff of what is it you're doing now that is connected to that.
Right.
And I also just felt like it felt a lot like kind of we learned some important things about. Moff Gideon is up to, but otherwise it felt just kind of a lot of filler, to me. It was not, I enjoyed it. It was enjoyable filler, but I think it was kind of they, after a couple of episodes that were just totally fun adventures, last episode they sunk that plot needle right into my vein. Yeah. And I just wanted another hit,
Right.
But that's why they're not going to give it to you.
Exactly.
But they give you the second best thing, because the only thing that would have made that episode okay was the characters they picked. This is suddenly our favorite characters again. We're back with Cara Dune and Grief. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah. Finally, my friends are back and let's do this. I don't care what we're doing. Let's do it. I missed you guys. I thought it was perfect. But if they didn't have those characters, I would have been very mad. And I thought the busted up ship kind of was their little segue because, that ship was not in space flying shape.
Right. I think that's definitely true. And I definitely did enjoy that part. And I think, Paul, I'm glad you didn't spoil it for me. But if I go back and watch this episode, knowing that, I'll probably enjoy it a lot more. Yeah. I just would have wanted 30 seconds of him and Bo-Katan talking and saying cool, I'll meet you, in a couple weeks on this planet. Just some way that some kind of a connection between that episode and this one, because this just felt totally disconnected from everything we learned last episode.
I think something about The Mandalorian is, by and large, the episodes tend to be fairly self-contained, a lot of them through both seasons. Yeah. And one thing that I feel they're doing is there is an overarching plot, right? But I feel like it really only tends to hit a handful of episodes in a season. That's my read. I mean, that was the first season, and that's my feeling this season. And what they do is they try and work through a number of kind of universe-related things, right? At the same time. Here, the whole thing in the base, and we find out about Gideon's plans a little bit, but it's really kind of just a hint at that. Most of what happens is, it's a pit stop. His ship wasn't space-worthy, right? We're not getting a bunch of the overplot, but it's just, it was very clear to me, also the episode title, The Siege. It's well, that's not what you call the episode where he meets Ahsoka, Sure. And also just going in, I was just they're probably not going to do that quickly, but I hear you, I mean, I'll be watching shows sometimes and I'm I just want the main plot. It's why is this season 13 episodes when it could be 6 and it could be a tight 6, right? Telling one story, or 9, or
I think the points you both are making about what works about this episode are definitely true. And like I said, I think I'm fine not getting Ahsoka. I'm fine that it wasn't a big plot episode. I just wanted a little bit of connection to it. Yeah. I think the other part of it for me also is, because you're right, Paul, you're right, both of you, a lot of times in the last season, we'd have a big plot thing and then more non-plot things. But often, if the big plot thing affected Mando in some way, we'd at least see a couple of just 10-second moments of him clearly kind of being shook by what happened or thinking about what happened. Right. In the last episode, he learned that everything he has been taught about the Mandalorians and the way and everything he's kind of dedicated his life to might well be wrong, or at least might not be what all Mandalorians believe. Right. And I saw absolutely none of that this episode. I
was going to say, I saw one moment of it that might be headcanoning it, but I felt like it was there, where the child is eating something. They're both eating soup at some point, right? Is that a thing? Right.
I love this scene.
And he's drinking it through his mask underneath it, and the child's looking at him. And I felt like what they were trying to convey there was Mando kind of thinking about, do I really need to keep my helmet on while I'm, hanging out with, my kid?
Interesting. Okay.
So, even if, and there wasn't, I can't really say, what made me feel that. Was it just kind of thinking that myself because of what had happened in the previous episode, or what? But I'd also already been thinking, this is such a weird way to eat food, right? Yes, so it's now that thought, that kind of doubt is in his mind a little bit, I felt it, and I thought about it while watching that scene. But aside from that, I totally agree.
Have we ever seen him eat like that before, or drink like that?
No, he actually says in the first season, because when they're on the Seven Samurai planet, someone wants to, the woman who's falling for him wants to eat with him, and he says that he eats in private.
Right. So I think takes his helmet off and eats, and then puts it back on and sees people.
Right. So, Paul, I think you're right. I think that is him doing something new. So, yeah, at least if there's that does seem maybe more subtle than I would have wanted, but at least that is a little bit of a connection there.
And Baby Yoda trying to peek. He's like, huh?
Yeah, he's like, can I?
So we get some more Baby Yoda. What do we think of Baby Yoda going to preschool? Although basically he's just dropped in the middle of 4th grade, I think it looked like.
Right. But I mean, he's 50, maybe 51 or 2 now, so
yeah.
Seems about right.
Teaching that kid some street justice.
Oh, God. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to see Baby Yoda as like school bully, but
I'm
there's clearly
so
like
ready for that.
He's the kid who's going to steal your snacks, you know?
Yes.
Those macaroons is mine.
All your snacks belong to us. Like, and like my question to him is just how you say so small eating food of this kind. Like he just wants to eat everything.
And he talked a little bit.
Yeah, kind of, right?
Yeah, they definitely seem to be playing around with his level of maturity and intellectual comprehension, because the same child who like doesn't seem to quite understand, like, you don't steal, cookies or eggs from other people, but also can figure out like this wire and that wire. I wasn't quite getting it there, but it was super cute. It was nice to see him be useful.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Right. Try to be useful. I mean, literally, we were watching the first scene, just before the first scene, like the credits where the part where they show like all the different faces or whatever, the intro thing. And we're like, wouldn't it be nice if like Baby Yoda actually did something this season? And then like right out of the gate, it's like, put the wire in the other thing. And we're like, hey, he's going to do so. Oh, no, that's going to, yep. But like, right. But like, at least like there was that effort and then, finally used the Force again to, to steal some snacks. But, like, that seems like as good a reason as any.
Very dark side.
Is that the first time he's used the Force this season?
That I noticed.
I think so.
Yeah, I can't remember.
He hasn't tried to defend himself at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, I mean...
Priorities.
Yeah,
Macaroons.
and I don't think he necessarily fails to understand, like, you're not supposed to take things from other people. Although, like, whatever. I mean, we can debate that. I mean, I think you shouldn't take people's genetic material, that's right, and consume it. But, like, I mean, whatever. You steal
that's
some,
a
like,
higher order than the
macarons or
cookies, for sure.
Yeah, it's a little different. Like, I don't even eat eggs. But, like, I think, like, that's sort of, like, that's the priorities. Like, food. Give me food. Oh, I can get that. Okay, I've got it. Whereas other things like, I don't think it's a lack of intellectual understanding. It's like, no, I want that food, so I'm going to take it. What are you talking about? Kind of.
Right.
Yeah. And he has the power to do it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like he's in the kind of, like, terrible twos stage.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm going to have a 2-year-old try to help me rewire my house.
Right, yeah, that seemed like a really suspect.
That's something your fun uncle does, though. That's not his kid. He's like, well, you need to get through this together, and I need you to plug that thing in that hole.
Yeah, when you're fostering a child, you probably shouldn't have them do your electrical work. That's probably,
Not a mother, but I would.
Fair enough, to each their own.
Get in there, you're small.
Katie, I hope you're hearing this next time you're considering Ashley as babysitter.
Oh, no. There's no offer on that table for that ever. I don't babysit.
Am I right that we're having the child not come along on as many missions this season? It feels like they're finding more reasons to leave the child back when they're going on things. And I'm wondering if in part because like the child's powers had been so high last season that maybe they're trying to not have him there because his Force powers can just fix almost anything.
Very possible.
They don't have him use it that much, though, either.
Right. But, like, in the previous season, he used it some, Like,
yeah.
When things got, like, really dire, it was like, oh, yeah, let me just use the Force to, like, get us out of this situation. And it does feel like there's a deliberate effort. I mean, I remember I said in the first episode that I felt like it was maybe they were trying to, especially establish, Mando again, and kind of let the child kind of have a little bit of a back seat. I still think that's kind of true, but it also just feels like it wasn't just that one episode. Like, it feels like that's maybe somewhat of a conscious choice this season. I mean, maybe it's budget, who knows? Like, it's probably expensive using the Force. Like,
and you don't want to overdo it.
Right.
I mean, it's like magical.
There would be a lot more Hulk in earlier MCU movies if it wasn't so expensive to do Hulk stuff.
Yeah.
Because you would think that the space, the snow spiders or whatever would have been a reason That was a pretty
Yes.
dire situation.
Yeah, that was like
For sure.
that episode was frustrating to me there because I was like, really? Come on, Baby Yoda! Like you got everybody into this mess. You've got the power to fix it. Do it. Like what
Just
are you
raise
doing?
the ship out. Raise the ship out of the hole.
Exactly. Just fly.
Yeah.
Like
And it's weird because I think, Paul, this may have been a point you made when we were talking about season 1, but I know that one thing I've enjoyed about this season is that the show itself is that we have a world where it's not about the Jedi, you know, where the decisions are not just made by these magic sorcerer laser sword wielding people, but it's more kind of like the people in the trenches who have to deal with things that the Jedi can't take care of. And so for that reason, like, I like the fact that we're not having the Force be Deus Ex Machina to fix every problem. But it just seems like an interesting story choice, and I think the reasons we're talking about are probably correct.
yeah. I mean, I do like that it's not so Force-centric, but it's like once you get Baby Yoda, like, you can't go back, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, so it's a little bit of that, like, too powerful hero syndrome, and that's mitigated by the fact that he is a child, you know,
Right.
the child, but, like, at the same time, it's like, those powers are strong. And so once you really, like, put that front and center in the plot, for whatever you know, I think it makes writing, it presents certain writing challenges, probably.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So what do we think of Moff Gideon's plans? Now
Are
that we
they
know
making Snokes?
that was so Nathaniel Muzzy wrote in on the Facebook chat, in the Stranded Panda chat.
Yeah.
That's what he was suggesting. I think I've seen a lot of discussion about, is what they're doing going to lead to Snoke, or is it even what they're going to do leading to the rebirth of Palpatine? I don't think it's that.
Or both, right? Like,
Yeah.
is
Right.
this the sort of beta thing, and then they end up getting a full Palpatine? Like,
Yeah, Snoke was like, they're like, oh, an accident. We have 10 of them. What are we going to do?
right?
Yeah.
They're like, ugh, have him teach Kylo Ren. So whiny.
Yeah, right, exactly. I don't want to deal with this emo brat. Like,
Each one Yoda's, each one kills itself. It's like, I just can't handle it anymore. Like with the Luke Skywalker just nagging them to death. They have to go through 10 Snokes.
I
can't
like the idea
handle
that there's like 10, 20 different Snokes, and it's like they all like are the same, but they're not the same, and
Yeah.
they're basically just the you know, Palpatine puppets or whatever. And like Ben doesn't know, or Kylo. Or
It's like
whatever.
multiplicity in space.
Exactly.
I like that we're learning more, and if we're going in just a cloning direction, I think I'm going to be happier with it. I have always hated the whole idea that the Jedi, the use of Force is a genetic thing, and it has nothing to do with like your will or who you are or
Yeah.
anything beyond just like, you know, are you part of one of the pure blood families or whatever it is.
Right.
And not to mention, like, I just despise the whole idea of midichlorians.
Right.
So
They did a lot of dancing around the M word. Or I mean, they said it one time. Like, they said
he has the
M
highest
level or
M
something.
count we've ever seen.
Yeah. But it's like they didn't say the word. They didn't say
Not
the
going
word.
to say it. You can't
Right.
make
Don't say the word.
But it seems that that's where they're going. I think if the idea
Yeah.
is that maybe they can like inject that into a clone DNA, okay, I can sort of go with that. I really don't want this to be that like Moff Gideon can take shots of the Force, you know,
Oh, right.
and because I just feel like that would really cheapen the Force if there's, because honestly, if that's true, then why weren't people doing that all the time in the New Republic? You know, why weren't the Sith doing that thousands of years ago?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe it's new technology, right? But I agree with you that I find it kind of distasteful.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, it would be very kind of the boys-ish, I guess, in some
That's
ways.
exactly what I was thinking.
Or like Captain America-ish, or, you know, I mean, these things. But yeah, like very, very specifically like the boys, which I have some parallels between this episode and I guess season 2, episode 3 of the boys. But I don't know if we're there yet.
Yeah, sure. You
Maybe
can go
we
into
should
it a
talk
little bit.
about workplace safety first.
Oh. Since we're on that, why don't you drop that? Then we can talk about how badly the Empire needs an OSHA.
Right. So I rage quit The Boys season 2 during episode 3. Like, just a particular thing happened, and I won't say my exact words, but I just left the room. I was like, I'm not watching this show anymore.
Quick spoiler warning: if you haven't watched The Boys season 2, probably skip ahead a couple minutes.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe I won't actually talk about. I guess I will. Like, so
I'm intrigued. You have to tell me now.
So there were a bunch of things, right? I mean, and there's some parallels between this show and that show. And one thing I really didn't like. There wasn't a lot in that show that I actually really enjoyed in season 2. I liked season 1, but season 2 just wasn't really doing much for me. Whereas here in Mandalorian, there are a lot of things I'm very interested in, right? But in Mandalorian, the first 3 episodes, there's always like some horrible treatment of animals, often eating something alive, or like, and you know, this goes back to season 1 as well, but it was so prevalent in the first 3 episodes of season 2 that like I kind of considered not continuing to watch the show. And
I think I know where we're going.
And so then here in episode 4, when you know they have this little cute creature that they're like, oh, let's go eat you. I was like, don't do this, and then like you know they get saved by Cara Dune, and then like becomes her friend, and I was like, okay, thank you, like you know, like I don't want to watch a show where every single episode I feel this way, right? And in The Boys, you know, first there's like the Deep, who theoretically is like the guy who loves animals, like sea animals specifically, right?
They're his friends.
But he's just like always getting them killed because he's a moron, I guess, right? And
come on, like, friends, let's go play in traffic.
Right, exactly. And so like, you know, I hated that. And then when they killed off a particular character later in the episode, who actually I thought had the only interesting dynamic in season 2, between him and his sister, and I felt like, first of all, I was angry that like there were so few interesting character dynamics in the show, like things that I found interesting, and that they'd like just like in a way that I thought didn't make any logical sense, because they'd shown him to be so powerful and then he's just like so helpless, and I was like, no, this is just like the plot deciding to do what it wants to do. And then secondly, like I feel like shows have a tendency, you know, to kill off Asian characters more than they kill off other characters. And, you know, but like maybe commensurate to how much they kill off black characters. But, and in season, and when we did our season 1 of Mandalorian recap, I kind of alluded to it when, you know, when Ming-Na Wen was just like thrown away, basically like wasted as far as I'm concerned in episode 5 of season 1. Yeah. And, you know, like, I don't feel like that was because she was Asian. Like, they kill a lot of characters in this show, but it's the kind of thing where, like, when something happens so often and you have so few characters of a given, like, race or gender, if it's, like, oftentimes it'll be a movie that's, like, almost all male characters, and there's 1 or 2 female characters who exist just to get fridged, right? Like, just to get bumped off. And so that made me angry in season 1, episode 5, and then in The Boys, you know, something similar kind of happens, except it just didn't have, you know, the child in it, right? It didn't have Baby Yoda, and it didn't have this mythology that I really care about. So, in order to sit through things that I find have a lot of really negative stuff for me, that I'm just like, I'm not really interested in seeing that. You know, like that many heads exploding or whatever. Like, I need there to be stuff that I'm really into. And so Mandalorian delivers a lot of stuff I'm really into. So it's more of a balance where it's like, there are things where I'm like, like this scene, you know, I'm not going to like rewatch this particular scene or whatever. But there's also a bunch of awesome stuff. And then in this particular episode, I don't know if we want to get into the casting yet, but I feel like they did something in this episode and episode 2 that kind of, to an extent, sort of rectifies and offsets, like, you know, just bumping off someone who I think they could have really gotten a lot of value out of.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I do think, actually, my sense is that Ming-Na Wen's character is going to return at some point this season.
Seems very possible, although, never mind.
But you're right, and we'll get more into the casting itself in a little bit.
So basically, just to sum up, like, I mean, like, as a vegetarian who, like, cares a lot about animals, like, the extent to which they're like brutalized, and we see like just like huge giant chunks of dead animal and, you know, creatures eaten alive. Like, I find it disturbing. Like, I don't want to spend a lot of my time watching it, right? Like, Jon Favreau made this movie called Chef that I really enjoyed, but like, you know, 5 to 10 minutes of the movie, I was like, tell me when this scene's over, you know? Like,
fair.
physically
Do you like the Lord of the
face.
Rings?
Like from Lord of the Rings?
Do you like the Lord of the Rings movies?
I do. I mean, they definitely have some issues.
So, like,
I
The
would say.
Return of the King, like, that's even hard for me to
Oh,
watch.
no,
And that stuff doesn't mind.
that scene.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating because it's, like, such a beautifully poignant scene. And I'm just like, can we cut to something else? Like,
Yeah.
the only reason it bothers me a little less there is because the point is that guy is disgusting. And that, like, he cares so little for like, his own son. You know,
Right.
and so it's kind of, to me, it's almost like evocative of sort of like how he thinks about living beings, even though it's like very unpleasant for me to watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know exactly what scene you're talking about.
And I can definitely understand where you're coming from there. And I definitely see the connection with this episode. I think there was... earlier today, I knew that you had watched the episode, and I wanted to be able to know who's going to be on this podcast tonight. And I tried to reach out to you, and it's kind of basically was saying, like, don't spoil it for me, but
Right.
are enough animals killed in this that you're not going to be joining us on the podcast tonight?
And I was like, I would like to be on the podcast tonight.
Yeah.
Do you want any casting spoilers? And you're like, no, thank you. And then an hour before we did the thing, I was like, can I give you a little casting spoiler, please? But I won't say that that's what it is, but you'll know, but, like, you won't know.
Yeah,
But,
so what I
yeah.
did was I watched, like, the first 10 minutes of Kim's Convenience, which
Yeah.
we'll talk about in the casting in a minute. Ashley, what up for you? What else about this episode did you really like, or any things that you didn't like as much?
You know, I liked, trying to think. I just like all the action scenes. Like, that does it for me. I liked when they were getting out of there. What were they so that reactor was just there? I was trying to, like, figure out why they were there and what they were really doing.
I feel like we're about to talk about workplace safety now.
That's
Yeah.
what I want to get to. Yeah, like, they just had this active reactor, like, in the ground, like, not too far outside of town.
Well, we've learned already that there's a lot of lava on this planet. Remember, that was the
Right.
whole big thing when they were at the end of
With
last
the-
season. There was
yeah.
like lava rivers, which is
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
how
How
my understanding
we
is
got
that
the T2 scene, right?
if you're within like 100 feet of lava, generally you're like really not a happy person. But fair enough. But yeah, apparently in the Star Wars universe, there's a rule that if you build something near lava, there has to be a button that if you press the button, the lava will come and destroy your place.
Gotta have that button.
It happened in Mustafar. It happened here.
I feel like that's just a Star Wars thing in general. Everything from the Empire has just one button or one thing that can
Right.
completely take it all down.
Right. There's no like real railings around staircases or around like, big dark pits. There's no like
Right. It's like, but that button at least is on this like pedestal kind of thing with no rail, and like these things are definitely not OSHA compliant. Like,
Yeah.
At least we've not yet seen death or decapitation by door this season. Because like
yeah, that's
I
true.
remember being a really little kid and like I had this like nightmare that like, the elevator door was going to hit me and I was just going to be instant death. And there was one time when I put out my hand to stop the elevator and it stopped. And I was like, I am the king. I am the strongest person ever. And my father was like, what are you kidding? Of course they're not going to build a door in that way that would kill someone by accident. Star Wars universe, not so much.
Exactly. That's one of the main defense systems. Someone's chasing you, wait till they're at the doorway, boom, shut the door.
It's perfect.
Decapitation.
Yeah, it's a thing. All right, I'm trying to think of anything else from this episode I want to touch on. I did think the little weasel thing was adorably cute. I'm glad that it both did not get eaten and also that it became Cara Dune's friend. That was kind of fun.
I loved Mando's shootout with the TIE fighter. That was just beautifully done.
Yeah.
When they were just spinning around, doing his Han Solo moment.
And then the child spit up all over himself.
I know. Ew, it was so gross.
I also thought it was interesting that with two of the TIE fighters that get destroyed, you get a moment of seeing the pilot like panicking as they're about to die.
Yeah, that's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we almost never saw that. And I wonder if that's because we're supposed to like kind of enjoy, like, yeah, they're going to get it, bad Empire guys. Or if we're supposed to sort of have a moment of like, oh yeah, it's real people who are getting killed on that side too. I think it's more the first, but what was your kind of take on it from both of you?
I thought they just wanted to show us the cool helmets.
Yeah.
Those helmets are
Like
badass.
I felt like this episode felt like a lot like A New Hope.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, you're breaking into an Imperial installation. You're escaping from an Imperial installation. You've got kind of deliberately cheesy dialogue at points, I think, where I think they maybe even used audio from before.
They
right?
did at one point when the stormtroopers were like saying like, check on something or whatever. I'm almost positive that a couple seconds of it were exactly taken from A New Hope stormtroopers speaking to each other.
Yeah,
I hope they did that.
Yeah, me too, kind of. I mean, I feel like it was very deliberate, right? Because then, you also have like a lot of joy expressed at killing a lot of stormtroopers, which isn't throughout all of Star Wars stuff, but it was a very big thing. Like when they're flying away from the Death Star and there's a couple TIE fighters chasing them and they blow them up and they're like, woohoo! It's like there's a lot of like cheering, at all this death. And, I mean, granted, like they've just escaped death themselves, so they're excited, which makes sense. Yeah. But it just had it felt very similar in that way. Yeah. And then also the thing at the end, I mean, there's the TIE fighter similarity, right? But there's also like, Mando shows up at the last moment, flying out of nowhere, and blast the TIE fighters out of the sky, and then they're able to successfully do what they're planning to do, which was not die. So it felt like it had this very A New Hope energy to me, and we had like the Arachnophobia episode or Aliens episode, the Tremors episode. There was a Seven Samurai episode. I feel like this was the New Hope episode.
We have to keep track of this. Right,
exactly. We should make a list of what film it was.
That's what we should name the episodes.
Yeah, that definitely tracks. I mean, even down to that gun that Greef was in looks an awful lot like the swivel guns on the bottom and top of the Millennium Falcon that they used to shoot TIE fighters when they were getting away from the Death Star.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he directed the episode, right? Carl Weathers?
Oh, I think that's right.
I think so.
Go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job. It was like it felt like it was different in tone from some of the other episodes this season, and I don't know. I find it interesting when each episode does feel like fairly distinct to me. Like each one is very much its own thing, and then they are tied together by an overarching plot and by two characters who are in every episode, but there's a distinction, not just in whatever's going on in the plot, but also I feel like in tone.
Yeah.
Well, it's like with Bryce Dallas Howard did the last one, right?
I believe
the
that's
last episode.
Yeah. I looked it up. Carl Weathers did direct this one. That's correct too.
And the last one felt like more of modern. The music was more, modern-y. And this one actually did feel more like an 80s, Star Wars movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think it's fair.
And I like that. I like the dynamic.
Yeah, I'd like to. I wish I'd taken the time to see whether there are like any interviews with Carl Weathers about sort of his history with Star Wars and how he went about getting this role, but then actually directing this episode, stuff like that. I think it's pretty interesting when people who really love a particular world, a particular universe, then get to create content within it. I think it shows, there's like, sometimes it can be a bit much, and this episode to me felt like it could have felt a little bit much, but it felt like what I wanted to watch right now. It definitely doesn't have so much of the kind of like darkness and weight that a lot of the other episodes have had. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, life's stressful, man.
Have you watched The Gallery yet, either of you?
No.
No, what is that?
It's everything that you're asking for. It's Jon Favreau did a behind the scenes. They sit down every single director. It's 8 episodes. Each episode's like 40 minutes. They break down each episode with the director, with the cast, the music, how they did the effects, how they brought people in from the, old movies to help do, this show. Like how many little details are in it, all the way down to what were they saying that was making me laugh? The ice cream maker?
What?
It's in there.
What?
It's in Mando somewhere. The ice cream maker thing from, what is that, A New Hope? The guy who's running, and they have like the running of the ice cream maker holding guy. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? At like cons?
I've never known that ice cream existed in this galaxy.
It's not an ice cream. Lucas just like they painted up an actual ice cream maker from like the 80s or early 70s, and they're like, it's just this canteen thing, and there's this whole long like, fan base thing about like the guy carrying it has his own action figure, and then they have a running of that character at the Star Wars cons.
Wow.
I want this to be the cabbage guy of the Star Wars universe.
Right. My ice cream maker.
So much.
That'd be so good.
I'll send you guys a picture.
Awesome.
So let's I want to chat a little bit about the casting, because we do have one great example of exactly what you're talking about, Paul, of someone who, a lifelong fan, it seems like, who gets to be in this. But first, let's chat a little bit about Gina Carano, the woman who plays Cara Dune. On our last episode, one of our other co-hosts, Riki Hayashi, brought up that there's been a lot of discussion about her on Twitter recently. A lot of people being kind of not thrilled about comments she's made about the pandemic or about the election that are going on. I don't want to get too into it. I don't want to get into a big debate about like cancel culture, stuff like that. But I think it's worth touching on. And I'm sure that we may have differing opinions on this. I think my view of it is I don't love the stuff that she's putting out. I'm generally like, if someone has different political opinions, that's one thing. Some of the stuff she's putting out about, not respecting masks or like not respecting the election count and things like that are stuff that I think just the world is a better place when celebrities are not putting those things out there. And there's some stuff that apparently a couple of months ago, stuff that she'd done that had angered people in the trans community, I think for good reason. I think for me, though, my general take on it is it doesn't make me... I can very much understand why someone says, like, knowing that, it makes it harder for me to enjoy the character. I feel like I know this stuff was shot before people knew too much about that. She's an enjoyable character. I'm enjoying seeing her. If Disney decided not to bring her back next season, I probably think I'd be okay with that. But she also does not play a huge part in such that I feel like my enjoyment of the show is going to be changed one way or another based on what they do with that actress. But I definitely can very much understand why some people, like, there are certain things that I won't see because of the actors or actresses involved. And I can very much understand why for someone else, like, that might be someone's breaking point. And I think I'm going to be curious to see how the discussion plays out over the next couple of weeks and months and what Disney decides to do.
Man, you guys, you guys have very different opinions than me on this stuff. I don't know. I don't do that with, like, I don't know. American Beauty. Let's start with Kevin Spacey.
Sure.
I love his movies. I will always love his movies. And, sure, he did some horrible stuff and he's pretty horrible as a person, but I don't know him. I see him play a character and I can separate that a little bit. Like, I don't know. It's weird. Like her, I couldn't have told you her, like Gina, her name.
Carano. Yeah.
She's, as far as I know, she's Cara Dune. So I don't follow her on Twitter. I don't read the stuff on Twitter like that. So I'm not really like into that. And then any like the cancel culture, like everybody who's coming out to say something about her. Okay, show me your Twitter feed. Let's go have a look and see what you've had to say recently. Everybody said, everybody can find something on everybody. She is an idiot. She is using her platform to say things that are going to be in a detriment to her career, which is not smart. And someone should tell her to stop doing that if she, wants to keep that, Switzerlandish kind of career where, you just got to stay in your lane, Gina.
So I have like about half from column A and half from column B. Mm-hmm. I've actually been a Gina Carano fan as an actress since 2011 when she did Haywire. I think she's an awesome action star. She was also in a
Deadpool.
show that I constantly...
Oh, yeah, Deadpool.
Yeah, she's in Deadpool also. But before that, also she's in a show that I'm constantly trying to get Matthew to watch, Almost Human. And I feel like Matthew, I, and Jacob Malicic need to do a superhero ethics episode on that show, which has Carl Urban in a role I love him in much more than the boys, but and Michael Ealy and Gina Carano has a fairly small role, but she's just like perfect in the role.
Right.
She's the actress that I picked as my number one choice for Wonder Woman back in like 2015 or whenever they started talking about making that movie. I think she would have just smashed it as Wonder Woman. She's like an actual fighter, so I mean she was a professional fighter, right? So she brings a physicality to roles that I think is very rare. Like, you know, particularly with women, right? But also with men. I mean, I think there's a lot of men playing action heroes where you're like, I don't know. And then there's others where you're like, oh yeah, there's like this physicality, right?
Danny Rand, for example, might be a good example.
Sure, yeah, maybe not bringing quite the physicality to Iron Fist. Like maybe hire someone who's, you know, actually a martial artist, like Simu Liu, who they hired for Shang-Chi, who's actually a martial artist, a gymnast, and a great comedic actor in a show called Kim's Convenience. And, you know, so as an actress, I have a lot of respect for her just in terms of what she's able to do. In terms of actors in general, I feel like the less I know about them, the better. I basically just want to see people as they are on screen. Yeah. I think when you have something like Kevin Spacey, like I'll still watch The Usual Suspects and enjoy it because it's one of the best films ever made. Yeah. And that's a performance where the first time you see it is one way, and the second time it's like he did a totally different performance. Like he went back in time and changed it, which is just utterly brilliant. I completely respect the decision for no longer having him making stuff because a lot of the things he did that were horrible, he did on set, right? Yeah. So these weren't like things that he did in his personal life that then, you know, were separate, and it's like you can be critical of that. But, you know, these were problems with actually actively making stuff. So it's like you can't have that, right? You can't have people abusing people while they're making, new things. But, I mean, for me, in terms of like, if you want to call it cancel culture, if you don't want to call it cancel culture, whatever, to me, it's like basically, you know, judging people based on their actions and then choosing whether or not you want them to be in, you know, whether or not you want to consume their art and whether you want companies to keep producing it. For me, like personally, I find what people have for lunch like would be more of a reason that like if I were to actually stop watching things that had people in it who do things that I think are horrible, it's like I think most of the world on a daily basis does horrible things, and like I don't like that, but I find a way to just be like, okay, you know, that's the way the world is. And it's like some people have political views that I find abhorrent, right? And the ones that she's espoused that I've seen, I vehemently disagree with, and I think they're very dangerous, right? And so, you know, I'm not really against deplatforming people from Twitter or whatever, or if I were a magazine, I'd be like, yeah, I don't want to interview her, right? But like
her publicist is like, oh god,
right, exactly. But meanwhile, it's like, you know, I'm certainly not in the camp of like, oh, she shouldn't be able to be in any things anymore as a performer. That said, like people who are like, I don't want to watch anything she's in, like, yeah, I'm not going to try and convince anyone they're wrong on that. Like you shouldn't watch things you don't want to watch. Like I've gotten pretty good at quitting shows, you know, and when I'm kind of happy about that. I think it makes me a happier person. So I think people should avoid, you know, if you want to avoid J.K. Rowling things because you feel like she does stuff, you know, she says some things that are harmful, then I'm certainly not going to convince anybody. I'm not going to try to convince anybody they shouldn't do that, right? That's a personal choice. But in terms of whether people should or shouldn't keep making things, to me, kind of the line is like, is a lot of their damage coming through their platform or through the art they're creating? Like, are they creating stuff that's like hateful? Or are they like off in their personal life doing some things that we think are bad, but like when it comes to business, they're basically professional and there aren't direct issues with that. And then I think like, yeah, you know, you should probably, I'm not really a huge fan of like all of these movements to cancel everything.
Yeah.
Aside from like canceling school and stuff so people don't die.
Yeah.
And I think I am like Ashley. I think I'm closer to you than you think, because I'm like you, and I think this is something both of you said. I can still enjoy some. I still think Kevin Spacey was a fantastic actor, and I still think J.K. Rowling was a great writer. My thing is that I don't want to put any more money in either one of their pockets, and so
I hear you.
if Usual Suspects is on Netflix, I'm going to happily watch that. And okay, maybe we can trace that he gets like a quarter of a penny from every time on residuals. I have no idea how that works.
He probably doesn't, but yeah.
But, you know, if someone was crazy enough to put him in a new movie, I probably wouldn't watch it. If J.K. Rowling's put something out, I'm probably going to look for a bootleg copy. I'm not going to try and buy it.
Yeah.
And I think with something like this, like, I do think that, you know, putting out tweets is nowhere near like what, you know, Bill Cosby or Kevin Spacey did in terms of like actual physically harming people. But I think also, Paul, what you said, like, to me, if this was, we found some tweets that said like, you know, she had voted for Mitt Romney and Bob Dole, or, you know, whatever it was, I have no interest in that. Like, you know, I don't think like just a person's political affiliations should be any a part of this conversation. As you said, I do think the two things she's tweeting here are very dangerous. And so I'm much more like, that's something I really want to have a lot more attention to in terms of like, you know, either it's like, you know, putting oppressed communities into more danger, or like pandemic stuff, or like attacking the election stuff. And I think the one place where I would maybe be a little bit more on the cancel side is that I do think, because you're right, I feel like what someone, you know, who they write a check to, for example, or who they vote for, I'm probably a lot less likely to care about. It's that her being on this show is what gives her Twitter platform that much more of a voice.
Yeah. More people follow her because they love her on this show, and
right?
Because she's in Deadpool, and you know.
Right. And so that's, I think, what makes me a little more like, I'm probably going to hope that, you know, her character, you know, does interesting things this season and then maybe doesn't come back. But, you know, of all the issues in Hollywood, I can say it's also probably lower on my list. But I think, as all of us are saying, like, we all have different issues that we would care about. You know, Paul, you're talking about how the meat eating thing, like, for me, you know, what she's doing about the pandemic stuff and the trans stuff, like, and the election, that's really important. I can get for someone else, it might be, like you brought up Gal Gadot. There's some folks who will never watch Wonder Woman because of what they perceive as Gal Gadot's, like, you know, very pro-Israel, anti-Palestine stances.
Yep.
Didn't know it. See, I love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
I've been super impressed by her. As I was like, really, you're going to hire this skinny model? And I'm like, oh, she was actually really good. Yeah. I still think Rita Carano would have crushed it, but like, you know, they're like, oh, there she is.
Yep. Yeah.
Woman.
And here's also the interesting part is, when Gina Carano first came out as, or first was on the show, there was so much internet hate about it from the exact opposite side of people saying like, ugh, why do we have this like uber muscular woman in Star Wars? Why do we have to be told that like, there's so much anger that a woman had beaten up the Mandalorian. It was like, oh my God,
really?
They're forcing social justice on us. It's like, no.
Wow.
And it's just so nice to see like thicker girls in these powerful roles. You don't ever see it. Like, I'm like, yeah, I could do it. I'm out there.
Yeah.
You know, not that
like
she could kick
definitely
my
more
ass,
muscular
but yeah,
than
it's
Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just nice to see it. Like, you know, that's not a size 0 waist, you know, bouncing around like pew, pew. No, she's taking names.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, every character and every plot choice is going to bring, you know, certain things that some people, you know, a lot of things are going to bring positives and negatives.
Right. So, yeah. So I think that's like, you know, we've some different positions, but all kind of the same general area. Let's now talk about the really positive casting stuff we want to discuss. And Paul, this was one you brought to our attention. You want to take this one away?
Yeah. So when I was watching episode 2, the one with, you know, the spiders.
Right. And the traffic cops.
And the traffic cops. So the traffic cops show up, which wasn't something I was particularly fond of in the story. But I was looking at them and I was like, who is this pilot? Like, he has this old school Star Wars aura to him. And I was like, I feel like I should know him. And I think I even asked after that, I was like, do you know who the pilots are? Like, they like looked like really familiar. Like, I felt like this was like someone from an old Star Wars episode who'd come back and gotten like this little role, right? And I was kind of intrigued by that, but not enough. And episode 2 was my least favorite episode of this season so far. And I didn't think much of it. So 2 weeks later, now, I'm watching episode 4, and I'm like, Appa! Like, it's Paul Sun-Hyung Lee who plays Mr. Kim on Kim's Convenience, a very popular, kind of groundbreaking Canadian TV show, like a sitcom, basically, right? But not like a super cheesy sitcom, like kind of a modern sitcom. And he plays the X-Wing pilot who's interviewing Grief, right, at the end, and then Cara Dune, and then he goes. I mean, they gave him one of the worst, maybe the worst line in the episode, which was
not a good way to make a connection with someone. Right.
It was like, are you, it says here, from Alderaan. And she's like, yeah, I'm from Alderaan. He's like, did you lose anyone? It's like, that's like, he wouldn't ask that, right? Like, did you know anybody on Alderaan, the planet you were from? It's like, so that was frustrating to me. But I mean, he's a national treasure, in my opinion, like a Canadian national treasure.
I thought he was negging her a little bit to try to get her to join the team. He was like, oh, you're from Alderaan? Did anybody live?
Oh.
No. Well, here's my
maybe
my card.
Maybe.
In case you want to do something about it, girl. That's how I took it.
That's funny. I didn't have that read at all. My read is definitely very biased by having watched the 4 seasons of Kim's Convenience like 3 times already in the last like 4 months. So like, it's the show that I just like put on like when I go to sleep, and I watched it all before that, and like I just love the show, and I think he's received multiple awards for that role. Plus, before he played the role in a play, and I feel like he's such a, I don't know, he felt like very sincere to me.
Yeah.
This character actually seemed much more like him in a lot of ways, from like what I've seen in interviews than the character on the show, right? Who I think he modeled that character a little bit more kind of off of his dad, right? And I mean, it's also a character written by, the show creator, Ince Choi. But so I was like, I need to look this up, and I looked it up, and someone was like, oh, in season 2, in episode 2, someone was like, I almost thought I saw Appa in Mandalorian, and so Paul like quotes it, and he's like, that was me. And it turns out like he's been this like massive Star Wars fan since he was 5, basically, right? Like Matthew and myself, he, his family, his dad took him to the theater when he was 5, and they saw the original Star Wars movie. He's a little older than we are. We saw Return of the Jedi, right?
Yeah.
But it was like this formative like show for him, and he's this big cosplayer, and he has like 7 different outfits, basically, right?
Yeah.
And
good.
Oh, and so like he's friends with Deborah Chow, who is involved in the show. I think, I'm not sure if she's a producer. I know she I think she directed an episode in the first season at least, and she must be some kind of producer on the show. But he's like, oh, what are you in town for? I guess in Toronto. And she's like, I'm shooting this show, The Mandalorian. He's like, what? You're working on The Mandalorian? No way. And she's like, yeah. She's like, actually, Dave Filoni, he had an idea of a part for you. She's like, do you know who he is? He's like, yeah, I know who Dave Filoni is. He's like, hold on, let me send you pictures of like all of my, my cosplay costumes that I built myself. And they were like trying to put him in one of the things. He's like, oh no, I want to read this exact thing, but
I think she directed your least favorite episode.
Oh, I think that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. Which, all right, nothing, no too much offense on that, but that was yeah. But he said like he cried during the costume fitting, like, and they bring out this helmet, and he's like is this Biggs Darklighter's helmet? And they're like, yeah, how do you know? He's like, because I'm a nerd. Like, he's like,
yeah.
And he's like, is this the real helmet? They're like, yeah. He's like, oh my God.
And there's a wonderful video that Paul shared that I'm going to put in the show notes for this that is really worth watching, because in it he talks about how he's just a huge fanboy, and he is he's being interviewed in his home. So this isn't like some set that the Star Wars producer like put him on.
Yeah.
And he's surrounded by like incredible toys and helmets and like all this awesome Star Wars paraphernalia. And so it's just amazing just on that level of like watching a super fan. But also, I think it's one of the most incredible things, and Paul, I think is really, I'm sure this is why you shared it, because it really speaks to what you were talking about before. Mm-hmm. He talks about how when he saw the show, when he saw those movies when he was 5, he loved it, but that he could never imagine himself as a Korean person, especially as a Canadian Korean person in the Star Wars universe. And that it just meant so much to him that now, young Asian kids would see this and see him in it and see themselves in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and that's a big thing about like Kim's Convenience too, is just like being able to see yourself on TV. And it's like 2/3 of the world's population is Asian, and I feel like, in the United States, it's actually a fairly small minority relative to some other, minority groups within the United States. But, it's nice to see, say, progress in that direction, and then I'm also super biased because I just love the actor and he's hilarious in and out of character.
Yeah,
and so
that's awesome.
It was just I had already enjoyed the episode right to that point, and then that I was like, what? I was just like so excited. So
mm-hmm. That's awesome. So let's end with a little bit of fan feedback. First of all, this isn't Nathaniel Muzzy didn't write this to us, Star Wars Universe. He wrote it to the Stranded Panda Network, but we're going to yoink it and call it our own fan feedback.
Yoink!
And he's definitely been like, he's posted before about how he's super excited to hear us talk about stuff on the cast. And he writes, cloning seems to be a major theme popping up, with the scientists having Camino patches and obviously the vat of clones. Also interesting to note that Boba Fett is a clone. My major question is Moff Gideon making Snokes? For some reason I'm having trouble seeing the screen, so I really thought it said Snickers for a moment.
He's definitely making Snickers.
Is he trying to give himself force powers? Is he trying to make force-using troopers? They might actually be able to hit something. I'm sure the internet will grab screenshots and analyze everything, but it seemed like they were being deliberate in the shots, not showing us too much. Also, Baby Yoda is a total toddler dick right now. Curious where that's going to go. I know Jeff Randall will probably fight me over this, but Bo-Katan is bae, and Cara can kick rocks. This opinion is heavily influenced by the out-of-character decisions. So I understand where you're coming from. Jeff Randall, if he were here, would say Cara Dune is bae.
Yeah, he needs to go talk to his girl.
Yeah.
I was like, who's going to say that if he's not here?
We've said it on behalf of him. But yeah, so what do we think about this the clones question? Is this going to become a major issue in this season?
Yes.
No.
Maybe.
Well, we've covered it. We will definitely be right.
Yeah.
This show, it's kind of like what you were saying before. Like anytime there is any like a major guest star, they get one episode. Like Bo-Katan, unless you have your reoccurring cast members. But anytime something like big happens, I feel like this show like sticks on it for one episode, and then does like a filler episode, and then it gets back to the main plot. And we only have 8, right?
Yeah, only 4 more.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if maybe by the end.
Yeah.
Because that'll mean that Ahsoka's episode is probably just 1, and I'm going to be a little frustrated with that too.
As long as it's not like she just shows up in the last 3 minutes of episode 8. Like, that's just brace yourselves for that very real possibility. Yeah. All right.
I'm going to be very excited.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're going to see a little bit more of the Mandalorians. I think they'll show up one more time this season, probably.
Right.
I think Moff Gideon there's probably going to be some big showdown with him at the end of the season. And I think Ahsoka could either show up kind of soon or like a little ways down. Did Bo-Katan give them a planet? They said look for her in this particular place, right?
I think they did, yeah. And I think the stuff I was reading online was that he's supposed to be on the journey to go where Bo-Katan said he's supposed to go.
Right. So I mean, it could be planet hopping on the way, refueling, whatever, or it could be next episode.
Right. Right. And one other person in the chat wrote in with the idea that what we might see is Ahsoka Tano having a duel with Moff Gideon using the Darksaber, which that could be pretty great.
I would love that.
Yeah, I feel like that won't go well for him.
Yeah.
Because if you think Cara Dune's badass,
Yeah.
Wait for Ahsoka Tano.
Well, and it's one thing that I do hope they're going to get into somewhat, which is that in a lot of the canon, the clear indication seems to be that like to really use a lightsaber well, you have to be versed in the Force. Mm-hmm. And
yeah.
You know, again, I hope it's not going in this direction. I hope it is more of a clone thing, but maybe that is why Moff Gideon wants to, you know, he wants to become a Jedi.
Yeah, sure. He's got Jedi envy.
Yeah.
Or Sith envy, maybe.
I was like, Jedi,
I think he wants to
that
become
guy,
a Sith.
He only wears black.
Yeah. He wants to be a Force user, not a Jedi.
That's what I want to be. I just want to be a Force user.
So one other key piece of fan feedback, and this asks a very important question that I want to sort of put you both on the spot and see what you think about. Jordan Metro writes, can we please get a breakdown of the Lego Star Wars holiday special that just dropped in Disney+. It is by no means canon. It's meant for kids in a lot of way, but there's a whole bunch of really fun callbacks and references that made me laugh. I'd love to hear you guys talk about it too. Hope to get a cast on it soon. So, will we cast...
Can you wait till Christmas? Because that seems like such a fun Christmas thing to do.
I feel like that should be seasonal.
Yeah.
Like after the last Mandalorian episode, right? When's that going to be? Oh, that's going to be near the end of the year, right? There's 4 more. There's like 5 more weeks in the year, 6 more weeks.
Yeah, I will happily commit to watching that and having that episode drop like December 21st, December 22nd, you know, sometime around then.
Yes.
That seems appropriate.
Yeah. Or like the 24th or 25th, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe other people actually want to do things on Christmas.
That's entirely
It's not
possible.
really my jam, but whatever.
Entirely possible.
I have a log to burn.
You know, all the Lego stuff is... Now, I do think we should actually watch both holiday specials and do a kind of compare and contrast on them. I think I might have more trouble getting people to watch the original holiday special.
I think so. Here, you can have people watch that with you, and I'll have people watch Solo with me, and we'll kind of like A/B test it.
Okay, that sounds like a good possibility. Ashley, you can decide what side you're going to fall down on.
I'm going to go Christmas special.
Yes.
Yeah.
The old
I don't
Christmas
need to see
special.
Solo again. I'm cool.
To be clear, the old Christmas special.
I'll watch, old and new.
Yep. I think even back then they called it a holiday special, not a Christmas special.
They did.
But
it's in a Weird Al video.
Well, and it should be remembered that Mark Hamill himself said that he referenced how incredibly bad it was when saying that the only thing he's seen worse was the Trump at the presidential debate. So
he's such a treasure.
Even the actors are not claiming it's the best, but it holds a special place in my heart. So yes, we will have a lot of holiday specialing, but I'm super excited for the Lego thing. I think Lego Batman is one of the best Batmans I've seen. Frankly, I think Will Arnett is fantastic. It's a total parody, but it's brilliant.
He's also a Canadian national treasure.
Yes.
Yes.
Also true. All right. Any other last things about this episode before we wrap up?
I have a question.
Shoot.
Are we supposed to think that one of Mando's friends put a tracking device on his ship?
One of the mechanics, I think.
It was the mechanics? Okay,
Yeah.
I thought he was just like someone on the inside. I was like, uh-oh. No friends.
Yeah.
I was worried for a second. I didn't. I was like, uh-oh. Because it wouldn't have been Cara Dune.
No, and I don't think it was Grief. I think it was one of the... And there was like a little bit of a weird side-eye at the beginning when Mando showed up. I was like, oh, they definitely are having some thoughts.
Yeah.
You know? And yeah, I think one of them was the one who planted the homing beacon.
Okay. I missed the
Which
side-eye.
also, so A New Hope.
Yes. Yep. We let them get away. They said better
Exactly.
work.
This had better work.
You're right. It's so New Hope.
Funny.
I also liked seeing Moff Gideon on basically a Star Destroyer. And I think this...
Yeah, they brought out the
Oh,
big
yeah.
ship.
Yeah.
I think this goes to what you were talking about before, Ashley, about the voices that we heard, or maybe even Paul. In season 1, the definite feel I got was when I saw the stormtroopers was these are not Imperial stormtroopers anymore. These are like mercenaries. These are guys who were in the military, got kicked out, and now they're getting paid to help guard this guy who they maybe knew from their Imperial days, but they don't have the Imperial discipline anymore. They don't have the, rigid, like, fear of the Emperor, fear of Darth Vader. They're just, kind of soldiers of fortune type things.
Right.
This felt much more like official stormtrooper stuff and, like, seeing the Star Destroyer and all that. It felt like last time that was, like, Imperial hangers-on. This is, like, this is the actual still remnants of the Empire still chilling, still seeing what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and kind of hiding out and, like, like the pilot says, like Appa says, like there's something going on out here, in the core systems. They don't believe it or they don't see it, but like I know, there's something going on out here.
Right. Did that whole scene, especially at the very beginning of Greef saying, I wish they would just stop, kind of come out to the outer rim. Did you get serious Firefly vibes from that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
His ship even kind of reminded me of the Firefly ship in this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if there was a single show that this was the most like, that's not Star Wars, it's like Firefly,
yeah,
right?
Definitely. Mm-hmm. The Western themes and all that.
Yeah, space Western, basically.
Yeah. All right.
Just the one thing that I would like to add. Is just in terms of kind of like canceling people. Like, I don't want to live in a world where like Mark Hamill doesn't get work because he dunked on the U.S. president. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to live in a world where we don't get to have Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka. I don't want to live in a world where we don't get to have Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka Tano or whatever other characters because she has, very leftist political views, very progressive political views. And there are things that I don't think should be political views, right? But like, unfortunately, we, in the United States, we live in a country where these are political views held by a large segment of the population. And I think it's a very, very difficult question, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think, to me, I always find it very funny when folks on the right wing get very opposed to this, because I feel like what we're doing here is the essence of free market capitalism, which is one of the few times I'll defend that system. Somewhere Matthew Carroll's ears just perked up. It's like, aha! Because all the time, folks on one side will say, oh, that actor came out as gay, or, that person did this thing about Black Lives Matter. We don't want to watch their movies anymore. Right. That's fine. Yeah. You can choose where you want to put your money. And I feel like,
for sure,
to me, that's the best way that, whatever gets called cancel culture, and I really don't like that name, but to me, that's its best version, is when it's people everyone gets to make that decision. And so it's, if someone else says they don't want to like this actor because they support BLM, you can do that. But for me, it'll be the opposite. If you're posting a lot of things about how, BLM are rioters, I'm probably not going to give you any of my money. And, because you're right. I am happy with that kind of environment, and with, I think, much more folks who go to these movies are going to be on one side, and so it might have that effect. But I wouldn't want something where Disney then says, okay, if you sign a contract for us, that means you can't tweet anything about anything. Right. I think that's certainly a danger that we could go to, is that Disney just does the like, fine, we're nothing from anyone.
Right. Yeah, I think we could do a whole episode on this, on superhero ethics. I think we should.
Yeah. We've touched on it before, but I think it'd definitely be a good one to come back to. So let's definitely plan to do that.
Regardless, I think whoever we have less of, we should have more Paul Sun-Young Lee.
Yes. So, I would really like that. Yeah. And
whose name I hope I'm not butchering. I'm trying my best. If anyone has any corrections, I will take them.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. And I think, honestly, I really like that idea, where it's not even as much like, I'm not going to give my money to this person. It's, look at what all the stuff that Chris Evans is saying. Like, I really support what he's doing. I want to give money to any project he's involved with. That to me is a great way that we can also look at this. So yeah, this is a great conversation. That part of it, I think we'll move over to superhero ethics for an episode sometime soon. But for now, kind of thank you both. Ashley, I know you've been doing some episodes recently on the MCU cast. Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, when Jeff was busy moving, Matt and I covered the run of Hulu's Hellstrom. So come over there for our very controversial tea on that show.
Definitely.
Oh, man.
if anyone thinks that the MCU cast is just about like kissing Marvel's butt and always loving everything, like there's definitely some stuff that Jeff and Matt and now you have disagreed with, and I think that's awesome. I think it helps remind people that these podcasts are not just about talking about the great things. I love Star Wars like it's my religion, but I'm going to critique the things I think aren't good. I'm glad that you guys can, talk honestly about that show, and if there are parts of it you didn't like. And Paul, I know you've been taking the Twitch stuff and the YouTube stuff that you've been doing for a little while and really trying to kick it into a higher gear with something pretty big kind of coming out in a couple weeks. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I'm streaming every day around noon Pacific time, and on Twitch. I'm twitch.tv/ZenMadman, and you can find me various other places as Zen Madman. I stream a lot of poker. I stream some chess and some other, sort of intellectual pursuits like language learning and some geography games and whatever. And my theme is mostly about just learning, trying to exploring the universe and trying to understand as many things and, develop skills and knowledge, and kind of also just talk about how we go about developing skills and knowledge. So, come check it out. And it's kind of interactive too, which is fun. It's always nice when people say hi. Ask questions, stuff like that.
Yeah, I've been popping up there a couple times. We actually did a video of you and me analyzing a chess game that I played, and I really dig your approach to learning. And I think what you're doing on there, I know a lot more of this is coming soon, is really just talking about how you learn these things and how people can learn them. And I think it's going to be a really exciting project, so I'm excited to see where that goes. And
That's
excited
awesome.
to see.
I don't know how to do either of those things. I'm definitely going to watch.
Awesome. Yeah, you definitely should. They're really good. And to everyone listening, would love to hear your thoughts. Is Moff Gideon the beginnings of where Snoke comes from? Is he trying to create stormtroopers who can actually hit something? What do you think about Cara Dune and Gina Carano? What do you think about the baby stealing snacks? Is he going to be the worst schoolyard bully we've ever seen? What's your take? You can find us on Twitter, on Facebook, or email. All that information is if you go to strandedpanda.com and then click on the Star Wars Universe podcast. Look for the 2 microphones crossed like lightsabers right over the rebellion symbol. You can also find there great stuff about other podcasts we do. My Superhero Ethics podcast, PandaVision, which both me and Ashley are on a bunch. The MCU cast, which Ashley has been doing a lot of, doing some great stuff there. And other content about Star Trek, DC Universe, all sorts of other things. So on behalf of myself, Paul, and Ashley, thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Jeff has spoken.
Just wait till the child gives someone a force wedgie. That's all.
Perfect.
He's like, try to put me in timeout.
And we're out.